Hello, I am live. My name is Ellie Gettinger, and I'm the Education Director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee. So, welcome to our museum moment. Today is a pretty special day in the Jewish calendar, and this year in particular is a special year. Today is Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura, the day of Holocaust remembrance, and it's the day, it actually literally translates as a day of remembrance, Yom HaZikaron v'Hashoah v'Hagvura. Yom HaShoah means the day of destruction. In Hebrew, traditionally, you use the word Shoah as opposed to Holocaust. Shoah means destruction. It's in some ways a much better term for the Holocaust. Holocaust is a Greek term that doesn't really seem to do justice to what happened. You know, it means a sacrifice to God that's burnt up in flames. It feels like the wrong word. Shoah means destruction, and it feels visceral. Hagvura is resistance and heroism. And I think that's one of the things that's not always fully appreciated in understanding and studying the Holocaust is how many different types of resistance there were, how many different ways there were to resist. And, you know, that this came from people on the outside, upstanders, it came from people on the inside. There was cultural resistance. There was religious resistance. I think about Rivka's diary, which has been such a joy to be able to share. And the fact that a 14-year-old girl can document what's happening to herself and to take that kind of agency, that's a real act of resistance as well. So today, in thinking about this, on this day of remembrance, this day of meditation, we are actually going to explore the historical context of memorialization in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, the Holocaust memorial that is kind of the big community memorial is in front of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation building on Prospect Avenue. It also happens to be in front of Jewish Museum Milwaukee. And one of my great pleasures is often taking school groups into that space. It's a very meditative space, despite the fact that you have cars racing by and people walking by and dogs and all of the different things that you get when you're on a busy street. But you do also have this sense that this is an opportunity for the public to come to terms with what happened 75 years ago. As I said, this is a special day on a special year. This is the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II and the liberation of concentration camps. Last week, actually, on the 12th, that was when Bergen-Belsen, which is where Rivka was, and Frank was there as well. Local and fabulous Herc survivor speaker Ray David was also liberated on that day. On the 15th. And it's to me, this is saying that 75 years ago, which is not that long ago, that we were in this universe of people taking back their lives and trying to figure out what they wanted to do. Now, in the immediate piece right after World War II ends, people had to figure out how to rebuild their lives. And there had to be some sense of how we can start to commemorate this. And in fact, in the 1950s, the Israeli government started the process of creating Yom HaShoah. And the date that they selected, it's actually the 27th of Nisan, that's the Hebrew month. And they selected this date because of its connection to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which I think on some level gives you a sense of the historiography of the feeling in Israel at that time, that they wanted to link the date that they were connecting to something more specifically about resistance. And I think it's an important story to tell. And I think it actually is an important evolution, even in Israel, that there is a much broader understanding of what resistance looks like. It's not all about armed resistance, although that is seriously one important way of tracking resistance. So, and thank you all for joining me. I see we have about 12 people, and thanks, Kelly, for my heart. In 1981, the Jewish community puts out a call for proposals, a request for proposals. And this is what that looks like. You can see in this letter, and I'll read a bit from it. It's October 30th, 1981. And this is a committee of the Federation. It was staff, the volunteer leaders at that time were Bill Appel and Barbara Cole-Spiro, both of whom are still in the community. Barbara is a very prominent and established artist, and I'm sure that her input was invaluable to this committee. She says, or the call is quite specific, and also immense. The Holocaust Memorial Monument Subcommittee researched several types of monuments, both here and abroad. The committee agreed upon certain types of concepts they would like to see included in a Holocaust memorial. The committee wants a memorial to illustrate the starkness of the Holocaust. On the other hand, they would like walls or panels included, which would also be inscribed with sayings and pictorial illustrations, descriptions of the Holocaust, such as a map of concentration camps, quotes from ghetto fighters, representations of the Jewish badge, a Hebrew prayer, something pertaining to the rebuilding of Israel, etc. It was a clear feeling around the committee members that the memorial not include any human figurative representation. They want the monument to provoke people into thinking about what it represents. Now, that is a lot to ask of a memorial. That's so many different experiences that you want to put into one small space, that you want to have people have a sense of starkness. You want to have a meditative space. You want them to have quotes to consider. You want them to have all of this going on in one small space. So the artist that they went with is an artist who was born in Milwaukee. Her name is Claire Lieberman. And Claire grew up here. She went to Tufts. She ends up creating this piece. And in some ways, she's very much in line with what they're looking for. Here is actually from our archives. One of the greatest pleasures I have right now in this time period is that I get to really share some of these treasures from our archives. And this is how she framed her assignment. And if I have any students or teachers on here, I think it's such an interesting assignment to give. Here is their statement about what a memorial should be. Here is how the artist responds. And for her, the focal point of this monument, and I'll show it to you in a bit, is a highly polished granite column, 8 foot high on a 2 foot base, which represents the smokestacks of the crematoria. So she is taking that idea of a figurative piece, and she is creating something that evokes a Holocaust theme without having a specific image. That kind of the monolith in the middle gives you a sense of the smokestack without being the smokestack. I choose granite because it's the hardest and most enduring of stones, and thus particularly suited to the monument, which roots the present, the future, and the past. There is no question in my mind that as Jews, we are greatly affected by our history and cultural heritage. The top of the column is sliced at an angle, carrying the eye ever skyward. On the base of this, she also said that there's going to be a yellow stone, which is reminiscent of the yellow armbands that Jews were forced to wear. And she encloses this all in a kind of in a circling, in a semicircular bench with brick and granite. And she also uses the names of camps on cortan steel sheets. Now, cortan is not one of those things that you immediately recognize. It's not like the marble that you see or the granite where you're like, this is what I can visualize this. I know this. Cortan is what's on the outside of trains. So she took that kind of level of sophistication and philosophical thinking, and she really developed it to create a space that you're not entirely sure why you're impacted by it, but you are. One of the things that always impacts me at this time of year is if you come there, you'll see there are lots of rocks within the pages of those cortan steel sheets. And each of those sheets has the name of a camp, a transit camp, an extermination camp. There are 22 places. The majority of those line up with the names of places that were used in Auschwitz's Yad Vashem's Holocaust Memorial. There's one difference. It's Gross Rosen, which is a transit camp, replaces Poznari, and I'm not sure why, but it's a great question that I hope to someday pose to the artist. Why that transition? And these are just 22 representative sites of all of the thousands of places that could be listed. She has all 6 extermination camps, but otherwise it's really a very, a small sampling of all of the different types of places that could have been listed that people were impacted by the Holocaust, where people were killed in the Holocaust, where people were moved in the Holocaust. So she takes those sheets, and in between them, there are rocks. And at this time of year, almost always around Yom HaShoah, you find those rocks around the benches where people have come and said, this is a meditative space for me. This is a place where I understand what's going on, and I'm going to make this like a grave site. In Jewish tradition, we don't put flowers on graves. We often put rocks. Rocks are permanent. And this is a way of saying that I am giving a permanent memory to those people who were lost in the Holocaust. Going back to the actual design and pieces like that, the memorial was unveiled on July 17th, 1983, so 2 years after the contents started. And this is, you can now get a little bit of an illustration of what she's going for here. I love this illustration because I think it gives that sense of the lightness, the dark, the raising your eyes. You can see how the steel structure is kind of centered. And then this, of course, now it's not letting me change. This is what it looks like. And it is an incredibly kind of, it really does give this kind of sheltering space in the midst of a busy street. And I like, as I always go into other Holocaust memorial spaces or any memorial, I want that feeling of having a time to think, of having a time to consider, of having times to be separate. And it's been an important place for the Jewish community. One of my favorite members, one of my favorite recollections for this, hold on, I'm having some technical difficulties. Is that I see Holocaust survivors in the community using this as well. That instead of just being a space that is, you know, off in its own, that there would be times when Sylvia Blasberg, who is a longtime speaker in the community who lived at the Jewish Home and Care Center next door, she would make a point of going and talking to people who would come into that memorial and tell her story. So it became a place of interface too, and sharing. And I think that's an important part of a memorial as well. So as we think about Holocaust remembrance today, I think it's important to think about all of the different ways in which we memorialize the Holocaust. And I hope that you consider the ways in which you can memorialize the Holocaust today, whether it's sharing your family stories, sharing stories you've read, you've heard about, watching a survivor footage via our website or via the Holocaust Education Resource Centers. There's so many ways to commemorate the Holocaust today and this week, and we hope you'll be a part of that with us. I will be back actually for a live conversation starter tomorrow with Brad Lichtenstein to talk about his work with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum on an Oneg Shabbat archive virtual reality experience. So it's pretty exciting. 1:30 here tomorrow on Facebook. We'll have the link up later on YouTube. And Thursday at 2, I'll be talking about our Magda Watts sculpture, which is really one of the most spectacular things we have in this museum and is always a pleasure for me to share. And then on Friday, I'm going to be sharing Eva Zaret's story. So thank you so much, and join us again here at Museum Moments. If you love these, please feel free to make a donation. We always appreciate it.